Amy Robinson was 19, working at a grocery store, riding her bike to work, trying to figure out adulthood like the rest of us. Then two familiar faces offered her a ride. What happened next wasn't random. It wasn't some fluke of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was planned. It was targeted. And the people behind it, they were proud of it. This is the story of how trust was weaponized and how hate took the wheel. Before we jump in, if you like your true crime brief and bingeable, you're exactly where you need to be. Hit follow now for at least 2 new episodes every week. This is 10 Minute Murder. People like to believe the world is good, that most folks, deep down, are kind. But then a case comes along that wrecks that idea completely. Amy Robinson's story is one of those cases. Amy was 19, living in Arlington, Texas. Life hadn't exactly gone easy on her. She was raised mostly by a grandmother, and she lived with both a mental and learning disability. She also had Turner syndrome, a genetic condition that made her smaller than average and delayed her development during puberty. Even with all of that working against her, Amy had plans. She graduated high school and started figuring out how to become independent. First on her list was getting a job. She found one at the local supermarket. The staff there knew her situation and supported her. It gave her structure, some freedom, and a chance to meet new people. The store was close enough that she could ride her bike to and from work by herself. It was a good start. Amy was doing everything she could to move forward. But on February 15th, 1998, that momentum stopped. She left for work like normal, unaware that 2 familiar faces were waiting for her. Robert Neville, 23, and Michael Wayne Hall, 18, used to work at that same store. That's how they knew Amy. They were no longer employed there, but they still knew the area. And they knew Amy would feel safe around them. That trust would cost Amy everything. That afternoon, Robert and Michael pulled up beside Amy and offered her a ride to work. Amy didn't hesitate. She knew them. They knew the store. Nothing about it felt threatening. According to a few former co-workers, there might have even been something romantic between Amy and Robert. She got in the car. What Amy didn't know was that she had just stepped into a car with 2 young men whose lives were spiraling in the worst possible direction. Michael Hall had his own challenges. He dropped out of school in the 9th grade and was often described as slow by people who knew him. Some of that came from the intellectual limitations, and some of it came from a deeply unstable home life. Michael tended to be more at ease with people younger than him. He struggled around peers his own age and completely shut down around authority. He gravitated toward people who made him feel less lost. That's where Robert Neville came in. Robert had been in jail for burglary. He had more confidence, more presence, and for some reason, he decided to bring Michael into his orbit. He gave Michael gifts, advice, a couch to sleep on, and Michael, in return, started mirroring him. He dressed like Robert. He talked like Robert. He quit his job at Robert's request. Michael didn't want to be friends. He wanted to be Robert. As they spent more time together, their conversations grew darker. They talked about who they hated, blamed entire groups of people, and started making plans. There was no hesitation. They knew what they wanted to do. According to their own confessions, both of them wanted to become serial killers. They weren't vague about it. They had a target in mind: racial minorities. Robert later told investigators, "We had a bet going to see who could shoot and kill the most people between the 2 of us, no matter if it was blacks or Mexicans. Anybody, as long as they weren't our color." Amy Robinson was part Native American. Earlier that same day, before offering her a ride, Michael and Robert had stopped by the grocery store to check to see if Amy was scheduled. They were looking for her. When Amy got in the car, she thought she was catching a ride from people she trusted. She had no way of knowing she was stepping into a trap. They drove her to a remote area outside Fort Worth and told her to get out of the car. That's when they pulled out their weapons. Between the two of them, they had a pellet gun, a crossbow, and a .22 caliber rifle. Robert later described it in his own words. Quote, Michael Hall, he had a pellet gun and he started popping pellets into her chest and face and stuff like that. My first 2 shots ran out. One hit her in the chest and the other hit her in the head. Then he, Michael, picked up his rifle and fired another set of shots into her. Then Robert said something else. We just busted out laughing. Amy cried out for help. She begged them to stop, but Robert and Michael kept shooting. When her screams became too loud for their comfort, they ended it with the final shot to her head. The bullet fractured her skull and killed her. They left her body behind and returned days later. They took her keys, grabbed the loose change from her pocket, and shot her again. Amy had already died, but that didn't matter to them. By then, Amy's disappearance was already public. She hadn't shown up for her shift at the store, and her family contacted the police right away. Investigators moved fast. They interviewed her current co-workers and were starting to reach out to people who had worked there in the past. Robert spoke to detectives and played it cool. He said he knew Amy from the store. He called her a friend, said he hadn't seen her and he didn't know where she was. That cover didn't last very long. Not long after that conversation, Michael's mother reported him missing. He hadn't been home in days. Then his stepbrother stepped forward with something far more serious. Michael confessed to kidnapping and killing Amy before disappearing. Police acted immediately. Warrants were issued for both Robert and Michael. They were found near Eagle Pass, close to the Mexican border. That's where they were headed when they were caught. Once in custody, they gave up Amy's location. They also gave reporters a line that made headlines. They said that they had used Amy for target practice. There was no denial, no remorse. They admitted everything and talked openly about the murder. They even said they had plans to kill again. Amy, to them, had been the beginning. Robert Neville, the older of the two, moved through the legal system quickly. His appeals ran out, and the state scheduled his execution. In 2006, he was put to death by lethal injection. Michael Hall's case was more complicated. Under the Eighth Amendment, a person who meets the criteria for intellectual disability cannot be sentenced to death. The legal benchmark based on IQ scores is generally considered to be 70. Scores below that line typically qualify as intellectually disabled. Michael's results weren't consistent. Some tests placed him at around 67, others landed him at 71. His cognitive functioning became a legal gray area. But the prosecution focused on intent. They argued that Michael had been aware enough to choose Amy specifically. He knew she had a mental disability. He knew she was physically smaller and less able to fight back. Most important, he knew she trusted him. That decision, they said, was calculated. It showed that he understood the consequences, and that level of awareness disqualified him from protections under the law. The jury agreed. Michael Hall was sentenced to death. In 2011, 13 years after Amy's murder, he was brought to the execution chamber. In his final statement, he said, quote, "I would like to give my sincere apology to Amy's family. We caused a lot of heartache, grief, pain, and suffering, and I am sorry. I know it won't bring her back." Then, like the man he once looked up to, Michael was executed by lethal injection. Thanks for listening to 10-Minute Murder, bingeable true crime stories. I'm Joe, the host, and if this was your first time here, welcome. Subscribe to the podcast and go to 10minutemurder.com. And TBH, you don't need to be new here to go to the website. OG listeners, I know you're going, but you can go there and you're more than welcome. 10minutemurder.com, you're going to find the murder blog. You're going to find photos from the stories you hear me talking about and more. Plus, you can go to 10minutemurder.com and email me. Tell me about a case that you'd like for me to talk about here on the podcast. And the one you heard today, I probably I probably should not be telling you this, but usually I'm in such a weird headspace sifting through the murder stories. It makes it nearly impossible to lighten me up and to make me laugh. But I think it's important to not dive too deep into the darkness that this can become, so I usually welcome it if it's possible. So, this person that I'm not going to name, they asked me to cover the case that you heard today. And when talking about the killers, Michael and Robert, they described them as a couple of people you wouldn't find books at their yard sale. I have never in my life heard that before then, and I laughed so incredibly hard. Inappropriate? Yes. Funny? Also yes. So, if there's a case in mind that you want me to cover, go to 10minutemurder.com. Okay, that's all for right now. Keep on binging if that's what you're up to. Don't let the end of this episode stop you. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.